spoke about it in this part of the world, as you go into public places, whether they're shopping malls or even just down the street or wherever. So there's music and there's lights and all sorts of fanfare or things like that, which are Avodah Zarah related at the very least. And there's a term that I want to introduce you to, for those that don't know it, even though we didn't start the class yet. Give me a moment, let me get the book. Oh, there it is. Somewhere. Okay. There is what's on the screen over there? Is that something again? Or what's going on there? There's a Talmudic term. The word is abizrayu, which is Aramaic or some other non-Hebrew language. And it means when something isn't the matter itself, but it is like the residue or related to it. Yeah, it's anything used for seasoning or spicing. That's the literal meaning in Aramaic, or Arabic, I should say. In other words, something which smells of it. That would be the way we're using it. Even though it's not the thing itself, but it's the spices that are related to it. And that's called Abisrayu. And that applies to different types of very severe sins. But one of them is, of course, this very severe one of idolatry. So even if something is not really idolatry, it could fall into the category of abizrayu, which means their seasoning, or the fragrance. So we said they actually took a pretty strict approach, and they said that you need to stuff up your ears and hold your nose, and I guess close your eyes when you're going down the street or in places where there would be these December 25th trees and lights and music and all that stuff. But we said just do your best, and obviously don't endanger yourself, and you just have to try not to enjoy it, not to derive benefit from it. Okay. Should we begin? Okay, I think that we did 16, but we're going to do it. We're on page 65 in the edition that I have, which is, of course, the chapter that we've been on for a very long time, because this is, as I keep mentioning, by far the longest chapter in this book, because that is the main prohibition for the Noachites, and that is idolatry. So it's chapter 5, and we are currently in part 5. paragraph or subsection, whatever you want to call it, number 16. So page 65 in my copy, number 16. If one must walk near a place of idol worship, okay, you don't have much of a choice. He should cover his eyes, stop up his ears, and hold his nose to avoid having any sensory benefit from the idolatry. Okay, so basically, hold your breath and just go. Even if the person has no intention of taking pleasure from these sights, sounds, and smells, he's still bound to conduct himself in the manner described, since he will certainly receive some pleasure from them if he does not so act. And one is obligated to be cautious even in a situation where there are no alternative routes. Again, if you're driving, do not close your eyes. All right? Better, don't go where you have to go. But that's not an option. You have to go. Well, then, by all means, do not endanger yourself or anyone else. However, if you can, you minimize in whatever you possibly can by closing your ears, etc. Actually, I heard of a particular Hasidic Jew. His name was Rabbi Israel Jacobson. I never met him. I knew his daughter very well. She was an elderly woman, and she has long ago passed away already. Rabbi Jacobson had, if I'm not mistaken, 3 daughters and no sons, and 3 very illustrious Hasidic, very, very religious and outstanding, famous sons-in-law. So Rabbi Jacobson, who was a very devout Hasid and very, very religious and scrupulous in his observance and his devotion and dedication to Hashem, to God, and to the observance of Torah. Again, I never saw this and I never met him, but I heard that he would wear earmuffs when going outside, especially in certain areas, even if the weather did not deem that necessary, like in the middle of the hot sun of July, he would wear earmuffs at certain points because of the church bells ringing, that he did not want to hear the bells. He didn't want to hear them, therefore he had earmuffs on. All right, so again, is that absolutely mandatory? I hope not, because people don't do that. But according to what we just learned, there surely is room to do that. 17. If an idol rests on a stone, the stone is forbidden for use for as long as the idol is there. When it is removed, the stone is permissible for use. Again, the stone was not designated, and the stone is public property we're talking about. And it's not like we learned earlier that a person takes a stone and says to the stone, Keliata, you are my God. We're simply speaking about a person taking an idol, which is forbidden, which is worshipped, and he puts it on a stone. So as long as the idol's on the stone, you cannot derive any benefit from the stone. So let's say it's a big stone, and someone put an idol, and you simply want to rest, and you just want to sit down on the stone. You may not, as long as the idol is there. If the idol is removed, you may. 18. If one has a house with a common wall to a house of idol worship, that could be, and his house falls, it collapsed. This is the classical case. They didn't make up this case here. This is the way it's brought down. He should not rebuild it as it was, but build it completely within his own property so that he shares no wall with the idolatrous house. In other words, let's put it this way. In our part of the country, there are things that they call townhouses. Townhouses, basically, it's a bunch of separately owned homes that are all attached. Like you can have an entire block that it's house after house after house with zero space in between, and they actually share a wall. So let's say someone has a house and their neighbor that shares the wall, maybe it's either a church or there's idolatry there. And now the building collapsed. You cannot rebuild it as it was, but you need to make a separation. And therefore, it has to be moved over. However, you're going to work that out with the legalities, but you cannot rebuild it as it was, because it comes out that even though to begin with, it wasn't up to you and it may have been permitted because you didn't have anything to do with buying his house, you bought your house. But now you are in fact rebuilding or participating with the neighbor and rebuilding something which will be used for idolatrous worship. May not. The space that remains between his house and the house of idolatry, he should fill with thorns or fertilizer. We know what that means. In order that the house of idolatry not be enlarged to encroach on his territory. So you have to make sure that you moved in a little bit, so you lost a few inches of your property, but you got to make sure that he's not going to then take advantage and move up to your property as it was before that you shared a common wall. So you got to do something to make sure that doesn't happen. If he has a common wall to an idolatrous house, he should measure the thickness of the wall, and the closer half of the wall is his and the other half of the wall belongs to the idolatrous house. The stone or wood or dirt from that other half is forbidden for any use, meaning even after it collapses. So basically, half the thickness of the wall belongs to me, and the other half, which is my exterior, which is his interior, belongs to him, and I cannot benefit from it at all. And as we're speaking, I'm not 100% sure, I think so, that this room that we're in right now, which is our synagogue, our shul, and thank God we actually purchased, we were renting until now, we purchased this room along with the next 3 storefronts. So we now own this room. Our neighbor, who used to be the owner of these 2, we were paying him rent, and the next 2. And we have grand plans, of course, which takes a lot of money. Now, as it is, though, we have our wall, which we share with the neighbor, which was the previous landlord from whom we bought. He is a, what's his nationality? He is a
Assyrian.
Assyrian.
I just
That
lost audio.
on the wall,
There we go.
There, you may actually have an idol or a cross or something like that on the wall. And that's not too comfortable, but that's not our problem. Until the wall, of course, would collapse, and then we'd have to deal with the rubble and who gets what. But otherwise, it's not our issue. Our side of the wall, we can have holy books, and well, we don't face that way because the Holy Ark with the Torah is facing east, and he's north of us. So his southern wall is our northern wall. But I do think that on the other side of the wall that we actually share, there may be something idolatrous. It's not our problem until he moves out and we knock down the wall. And then there's no problem with the wall either, because it just wall just held up that thing with a nail or whatever. As long as he'll take his whatever it is, his idol or whatever, and get rid of it, or will be able to fulfill the mitzvah of destroying it. 19. The proper manner of destroying an idol and all the articles that are forbidden because of it is to grind them to powder and scatter them to the wind, or they should be burned and dumped into the Dead Sea. Of course, that's a very particular place, which is in the Middle East. And, but that's the example, that's a classical example given, or a similar body of water to corrode or be forever lost. That is the way to get rid of it. In other words, it's insufficient to just bury it and say, well, I'm burying it and it's out of sight, out of mind. No, it can take a long time to decay. And when a piece of metal or a piece of wood is buried, it surely exists for a very long time. So therefore, you have to really get rid of it in this way that they described. It's not a common mitzvah that we get to fulfill. And I remember a friend of mine a number of years ago, perhaps about 10 years ago or so, he was very excited because he was dealing with a Jew who needed mezuzahs, the little scroll that we put on the door, on the right doorway, and the person needed mezuzahs. And he went to the house to affix mezuzahs properly, etc. And he had to check through the whole house to see which doorway requires one, and some don't. Like generally a closet doesn't, a bathroom doesn't. Then, depending on the size of the room, so there's different factors. You have to go through it. And then there was this area, sort of like a very deep walk-in or crawl space or something. And he saw over there lots of idols. And he asked, what's this? Long story short, after the whole questioning and interrogating, they were really Avodah Zarah. How this person got them, not that he believed in them or anything, but, and my friend explained to them, you know that it's very forbidden to even own this and have this in your property. So the guy said, get rid of it, do whatever you want, I don't need it. So he said, you could just throw it out, but he couldn't just throw it out. You'd assume just take it out to the garbage dump, go to the alley and put it in the rubbish bin. Nope. So he actually did the mitzvah of destroying, and it was a lot of idols, and they beat them, and then they burned them to a powder, and this is what they did. This is what's got to be done. So when you have the opportunity, again, you can't do it to someone else's property, but when you are going to destroy it, it's insufficient to just take it to the nearest bridge, or just throw it to the ocean as is, or to bury it, or to throw it into the garbage dump. Those things are not really sufficient. It's got to be destroyed in a way that it no longer exists. 20. An idolatrous figure is nullified by chopping off the tip of the nose, or the tip of the ear, or the tip of the finger, or by hammering in a portion of its face, even though no material is lost. It's just, banged in. Or by selling the figure to a Jew who smelts metal. All these constitute nullification. Once nullified, the figure is permissible to own and use. So in other words, if you don't want to get rid of the entire thing as we described in number 19, so all you have to do is make it no longer idolatrous. And by doing any of these little things that you did, by destroying its perfect image, by cutting off the tip of this, that, or the other, that is sufficient. And now you could keep it just as an artifact. 21. An idol, or any accessory to an idol, if it is nullified as an idol, becomes permissible for use. But anything that is offered up to the idol remains forbidden forever, even after the idol is gone. And nullification is of no help. Nullification must be performed by the one who worshipped the idol. If one who did not worship the idol nullifies it, the act accomplishes nothing. It's got to be the worshiper. And if that person is no longer available or no longer living, there's no way to nullify it. And then you'd have to go back to what we said in 19 to actually physically destroy it. But again, if the idol worshiper himself nullifies it, that would work. Number 22. An idol worshipped by Jews can never be nullified, even if a Noachite owned it in partnership with the Jew. In other words, nullification only works if a non-Jew worshipped something, then the non-Jew can nullify it. However, if it was a Jew who worshipped it, it cannot be nullified. It is forbidden forever and must be destroyed, like we described in 19. Similarly, if the idol of a Noachite comes into the hand of a Jew, and afterwards the Noachite nullifies it, his nullification is of no help at all. It is forbidden forever. In other words, we're much stricter if it's worshipped or owned by the Jew. So this would be a difference, even though in general, we say that all the rules that apply to idolatry are pretty much the same between Jew and non-Jew, except for the exceptions. And this is one of the main cases when it comes to nullification. We're much stricter if something is associated with a Jew. In other words, in a certain sense, it's much worse for a Jew to worship idolatry than it is for a Noachite, even though it's one of the 7 Noachite commandments and it's a capital offense and it's very forbidden. There's still a difference. 23. An Israelite cannot nullify the idol of a Noachite, even if it is in the domain of the Noachite, and the latter gave the Jew permission to nullify it. Only a Noachite can nullify his own idol. So it doesn't help if he tells the Jew, do what you want, destroy it. I mean, destroy it, of course, would work, but I mean, nullify it. So he cannot nullify it except for the non-Jew, the Noachite himself. 24. Even though it's really, really short, let me just give you a little bit of a background or intro to number 24, which is just a few words. In Jewish law, going back to Mishnah, which is the main text of the oral tradition, there's Talmud, which consists of Mishnah and Gemara, and then just keeps going. So in Mishnah, and then of course in Talmud, etc., there's the 3 types of people which are almost always bunched together. And they are Cheresh, which means someone who's deaf mute. Shoite, which is someone who is insane. Someone who is, by Jewish law, legally, well, translated as a fool, or insane is probably the most accurate translation. Someone who's truly mentally insane. And Katan is a minor under the age of bar or bat mitzvah, 13 for a boy, 12 for a girl. Those 3 are bunched together all over Jewish law. Cheresh, Shoite, and Katan. Someone who's deaf and mute, that's one type. Someone who's insane, and someone who's a minor. What are they always bunched together? That basically what they do doesn't count, and they are not responsible individuals. They are not trustworthy, and they are exempt from all commandments, and they're exempt for committing any sin. Those 3 categories. So now, 24. A minor, that would be someone under bar mitzvah, or a fool, which of course they mean, like I said, someone who's really, by Jewish law, insane, cannot nullify an idol. Because as we said, for the very simple reason that what they do doesn't count. Which would mean over here, we're talking about a Noachite even. So a Noachite cannot nullify if it's a minor or a fool. And the question is that we've discussed this quite a while ago. What is the age of being a minor or an adult when it comes to the Noachite? Is it 13 and 12 as is by Jewish law, or perhaps not? And in a different series before we started this book, so you could probably look it up in one of the classes, it was when we're doing the Sedei Chemed, so maybe class number 17 or something, or I'm just guessing. So over there, he brought down different opinions, and the common opinion amongst the later codifiers were that basically you need to judge each case, each individual on his own merits. In other words, unlike, let's say, the law in the United States, where basically, depending for what, it's either 18 or 21 that you're considered an adult. At 21, you're for sure an adult. If you're, as long as you're not mentally deranged or insane or whatever, 21 is a responsible adult. 21, you can vote. 21, you can drink. 21, you can do everything by 21. That's the legal age of adulthood. And again, for a bunch of things, probably 18. And then it depends on the state as well. It doesn't matter, even if the person is very childish and they're 22 years old. Too bad, they're 21, they're an adult. And on the other hand, if somebody is very mature and very intelligent and very responsible, but they're only 15 years old, well, they're a minor as far as everything is concerned in the United States. A 15-year-old is a minor. And similarly, by Jewish law, the boy of 13, the girl of 12. That's it. Well, for a Noachite, from the perspective of the Torah, according to many, it depends on the individual. So you can have two people that were born on the same day, or theoretically you can have twins, and they're both age 15. This one is considered an adult, this one's considered a minor. Why? Because he's a responsible adult, mature, and this one is an irresponsible, immature child. So you'd have to judge it. Anyhow, a minor, whatever that means, so for a Jew, it's very clear, under 13 or under 12, or a fool cannot nullify an idol. Okay.
Excuse me, Rabbi?
Yes.
Okay, I went to the military at the age of 17, and that was around the time of Vietnam. Back then, you were an adult at the age of 18 in America. You could drink, you could vote, you could get a driver's license, all those different things.
Well, first of all, driver's license is a different category, because even today, I think most states it's 16, and there are some states maybe even 14. So
I think it was 16 then.
Huh?
I think it was 16 back then too. But my point is that, I mean, you can go to prison at 17. You can go to the military at 17. They adjudicate you as an adult, depending on the court that you go in. So when you're saying it depends on the individual, if he's a responsible individual or whatever, that would mean that 17-year-old is considered an adult.
Whatever the age that they decide, it's still an age. In other words, were you able to go to the military, and can a person go to regular prison, not juvenile, at age 15?
It depends on the state. Mississippi, yes.
What's their age?
They go down to 14. Some states go down to 12 and 13. They've been doing it for many years.
13 is an adult for everything.
Well, it depends on
Alcohol,
the
tobacco.
It depends on the heinousness of the crime in certain states where they adjudicate you as an adult.
So do they have juvenile court and juvenile prisons?
Not in those cases. In some cases, they've sent people. I know that back when they had the chain gangs, they were putting them on as young as 14 and 13.
Okay, but not younger. You know, as a 10-year-old is considered a minor.
Okay.
Is that right? 10-year-old?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So whatever the age is, I was just saying 21 because it's a set age. If the age is 13, okay, then that really fits with the Torah. But the point is that there's a set age, as opposed to what many say, that when it comes to a non-Jew, to Noachite, they're supposed to be judged individually. In other words, when there's a person who transgressed, the court first needs to establish, is this person a minor or an adult?
I think what Aaron was saying is that the American court system, you might have a standard, but then there's a lot of flexibility depending on the case. So,
Well-
so they have kind of both.
Depending on the case and the state.
Okay,
Yeah.
but whatever the age of this, I mean, if let's say, something that's pretty clear, if someone committed a terrible crime like murder, and it was minutes before they turned a certain age, they would not be sentenced.
They might be, you know, the courts have a normal age, but they have flexibility depending upon the case at hand and depending upon the person's level of maturity.
Really? If
Yeah.
someone, let's say another example would be, if an adult, a 25-year-old man had relations with a girl and it was a day before whatever age it would be, they would be able to be lenient and say that she could consent?
That depends on the state.
In real cases, they have a certain amount of flexibility.
I thought they're very rigid.
No,
If they're
in
gonna
some states, you can actually get parental consent for people get married at the age of 13 and 14, whereas
How about-
the normal age
younger
would be
than that?
17. Huh?
How about younger than that?
Some states, yes.
And what age does one not need parental consent? That they could do it on their own?
17 in Illinois. I mean, 18.
18 in Illinois.
But when I was 17 in the military, I could have gotten married, did whatever I wanted to, even though I was considered a minor in the free society.
But that's because there were a different set of rules because you were in the military.
Right.
So you could have gotten married, and then that marriage would have been legal, even though you then went back home with your wife and you were no longer in service.
Right.
Okay.
There's so many variations there is what I'm looking at. So but then you said that there's a where the courts have some leniency in how they deal with it.
Uh-huh. Right. Okay. So it's not very rigid.
No, because I was looking at some things going on in Chicago, and when they mention teens, they say 17, 18-year-old. They're calling them teens, but actually, when that 18-year-old goes to court, he's an adult. And when that 17-year-old goes to court, he's an adult too. It just depends on the judge. He can say, okay, you're considered an adult. We're going to put you in adult court. I mean, it's up to the judge's discretion in a lot of cases.
I hear you. But then there's things where there's the legal, if you want to get very technical, but they always look the other way. Like, for example, I guess jaywalking is illegal, but in most cases, unless they're just using that for some other thing, they're not going to actually arrest a person, let alone give them, they make, I don't even know if they'll give them a citation, but they're not going to arrest a person for jaywalking. So similarly, when it comes to selling alcohol, what's the age in Illinois? 21? So that would go by the minute. But again, who's going to care? But if at 11:59 p.m., this person who's almost 21 buys alcohol, that's illegal.
Hmm.
And, they're very rigid about that.
Unless he's in the military at 18, then it's legal.
Wait a second. So if he's currently in service and he's like on whatever they call furlough or his day off or something, he can just walk into any liquor store and buy it because he's currently in the military?
At least on a military base, he can.
No, I know that. I'm asking, can he walk into a regular?
Not now, but back during the time when I was at that age, you could.
You just have to show that you're in the military.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I mean, they figured if you were old enough to kill, you're old enough to drink.
Uh-huh. Okay, let's go a little further. 25. The nullification of an idol automatically nullifies its accessories. But if only the accessories were nullified, although they are permissible for use, the idol itself remains forbidden. Okay, so basically, the idol is more intense. So all you have to do is nullify that, and automatically the accessories are permitted. 26. Vessels that an idolatrous priest holds in his hand, such as a goblet, an incense tray, or a recorder, or other musical instruments, are considered accessories and require nullification. All right, so that's explaining or giving examples to what we said in 25 as far as accessories are concerned. So again, if he nullifies the actual idol, then the accessories are automatically nullified. But if he only nullifies the accessories, and these are examples, then the idol still remains forbidden. "27. If the idolatrous figure is given as collateral or sold to a Noachite or to an Israelite who does not smelt it, or if it falls onto a garbage pile and is not cleaned away, or it was stolen by robbers and the articles were not reclaimed, or if one spat in front of it or urinated in front of it, or one dragged it on the ground or threw it into excrement, it is still forbidden, as these do not constitute nullification." Similar to what we said back in 19, now they're just spelling it out. So even though you're clearly disrespecting it in the biggest way, that's not called nullification. You don't just say, well, obviously this person no longer respects it and he's not worshiping it. It has to be clearly nullified. 28. If the worshipers abandon an idol and it is a time of peace, not war, it is permissible for use as a nutcracker, etc., because it is considered nullified. Since they did not take it with them, it shows that they no longer value it. So again, if it's time of war, it's a different story. They didn't take it because they were running for their lives. But here, as long as they just left it, that means that we can say they nullified it. But if it is the time of war, it is forbidden because it is assumed they abandoned it only because of the war, and their life is more important to them than their little gods or whatever they're worshiping. So that would be a difference as to when you found it. So I guess, today with Ukraine and Russia, if stuff was left behind, some idols, as these people fled as these refugees, that would still be considered forbidden because it's time of war, for sure. And those refugees were running for their life, and they barely had time to grab minimal belongings. But if it's time of peace, different story. 29. If an idol broke in half by itself or by accident, the broken pieces are forbidden until they are nullified. Now, again, breaking it is insufficient. Therefore, if one finds broken pieces of an idol, they're forbidden for use because it is possible its worshippers did not nullify it. Just because it's broken doesn't mean that it was purposely broken with the intention of nullification. 30, if the idol was made in pieces that fit together so that the average person could reassemble it, one has to nullify each separate piece. If the idol cannot be reassembled, only one limb need be nullified. Again, just very practical, because you look at it as one entity or not. So if it can all be put together easily, well, then each piece has the status of an idol. 31, an idol's altar that becomes damaged is still forbidden for use or for any gain or benefit until the major portion of it has been smashed by the idolaters. So just because a little bit got chipped or nipped, or you have a little stone from that, it still may not be used, and you can't sell it or derive any benefit from it until the people that actually worship it, that actually use it, will nullify it or smash it. All right. Questions, comments?
Rabbi Turin, did you say that the accessories like vessels and incense vessels, they do not have to be nullified, even though they're like shaykh to the idolatry?
If the actual idol was nullified, then they automatically are nullified, correct?
That's interesting. Okay.
Right. So in other words, let's say practically there's a church and it's got this huge idol, which that's the thing that's being worshipped. And then they have all these accessories, whether it's the musical instruments or what have you, and that idol was nullified, everything else is automatically good to go and kosher.
Well, in a church, they aren't actually worshiping the
Idol.
individual statue. It sort of represents something. So the accessories would still.
Okay, but how? And then you have a bigger problem. How then do you nullify? It's not an idol that they're worshiping. Then in that case,
It's like the statue itself is an accessory.
okay, that's interesting. You know, as we're talking about, let's say the ancient idolatries of, let's say, Baal.
Mhm.
Now, if I remember correctly, there's the main one idol, but then they did manufacture little ones, like, that they could use as necklaces or pocket size. They can go around with, but those you're saying would just be accessories because they're symbolic of the big one, of the one and only.
Yeah, so in the case of a church, the statues are, they don't actually have a big statue somewhere that says that this is the statue.
Right.
They have this idea that they're worshiping,
right?
This concept, and they use the statues to kind of help focus on it. But it's so how.
So you're saying it would all be accessories?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, like maybe they have incense tray that they burn the incense on the altar or something. Like in other words, just from my background, what I've come from, like there's things that are shaykh to it that if I saw it, I would associate it with Avodah Zarah. And I'm just saying, that's my feeling. I'm trying to make sure that it lines up with Torah. My feeling lines up with Torah. Do you understand kind of what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Right. In other words, James' point is, I'm sorry, Bob's point is that at least, let's say, Christianity, there is no idol or cross that is actually the idol of worship. It's a concept, it's a belief, it's a misconception. And to represent that, there are countless little or big crosses, idols, or this guy who's, nailed in, crucified, whatever, but it's not, they don't believe that that's the thing. So he's suggesting or asking that maybe all of those things are considered accessories. And there would be no way in, let's say, Christianity to nullify the idol because there is no idol, as opposed to other ones in the Far East, in India, and all of those, that there's dozens and dozens of different types of Avodah Zarah, which are, many of them are idols. Or some of them might be live animals or whatever they do.
Well, question now, didn't you tell us that we could wear, say, crucifixes but that's part of that process, and that's part of those accessories.
It's not even an accessory. That's what we're saying. Because if it's made as a piece of jewelry or as a symbol, as opposed to, let's say, the one that's actually in the church or even in a house, if a person puts it there, that they're going to pray in front of that, that's different than dangling in the rear view mirror or even around the person's neck. That's the distinction we made.
Okay, so there's crucifixes that have this guy hanging on them. Then there's those ones that don't have him on them.
We said there was no difference. We said even the ones that have the guy, if it's just a necklace or something like that, it's permissible. Right? Remember we said that?
Yeah, that's how it's written. I'm just wondering, because if that's like, if it's used as like a talisman or as a good luck charm,
Yeah.
would that be a problem?
Well, I think the next part is where he's going to get into superstition and things like that. And that might be where we're going to get into good luck charms and things like that. Because number 20 of the next part 6, number 20, starts off with what is a charmer?
Well, I was wondering about also with the question of a church, if somehow the statue that's used is nullified, would that cause the other vessels that are used to be nullified, or would they? Because if the statue is an accessory,
Then it wouldn't, right?
then each item would have to be nullified separately.
Right, unless you want to say that even though this is not really the idol they're worshiping, but in the context of this church, everything else is an accessory to that one. But that's just a thought that we don't know that for.
Yeah.
You know, right. So don't know. Yeah. So, as I say, the next piece is going to be quoting various different verses where when the Torah speaks about prohibitions, there's all sorts of black magic, sorcery, all sorts of stuff like that, that different religions or cultures or whatever believed in. And they're all forbidden for Noachites as well. And this is actually the last part in this chapter. It's part 6. And it's going to deal with all those different types of things, defining what they are, voodoo and all that stuff. And then, interestingly, there's sort of a philosophical discussion within the Jewish tradition as to what is the view of all of these things that are forbidden, all of these superstitious things. One approach is that they do exist, they do have powers, they were granted powers, and just that God forbids us to use them. But they do have powers. And there's support for that approach, and one can bring proof from that. For that one, for example, we just had an Abraham Avinu. Abraham sent away his other children that he had from his other wives or concubines, whether it was Hagar or Keturah, or according to Rashi and others, it was the same person, Hagar and Keturah. He gave them gifts. Well, according to some interpretations, the gifts that he gave them were spiritual powers of magic, etc., which he did not want his son Isaac to have anything to do with them. And from that actually developed idolatrous beliefs and religions, which is pretty interesting, because here Abraham stood for monotheism. And as we know all the stories, how he pretty much single-handedly turned over the whole civilized world at the time, and he changed everybody, and he fought and he proved that nothing else should be worshipped. No idol, no stars, no constellations, no planets, nothing other than the one and only God. And here he gave away all these spiritual powers that were from klipa, from tuma, from the side of impurity, that are forbidden to be used. He gave them away to his children, his descendants, and from that came these other religions. Kind of ironic. The other approach is that they have no substance and they're not real and they don't exist and they have no power, and it's all a bunch of baloney. It's all phony. And people are believing in a non-entity. So those are the two approaches. One thing is for sure, it's forbidden, whatever we're going to define. All of these sorceries and all of these superstitions and all of these things are forbidden. The question is, but do they really have powers and we just can't use them? Or do they not?
Is this for the Noahide or is it for the Jew too?
Surely for the Jew. We're talking about for the Noahide, but for a Jew, it's definitely not allowed. No question.
Okay, let's look at this thing with talisman for, say, putting in children's room for Lilith or whatever. There are actually people in the Jewish community who go around and do these things, and they create these things to protect people from entities.
Okay, that is a very good point you just brought up, and it's a very good point. Let me just reiterate your question. On the one hand, the Torah clearly forbids any type of good luck charm or any type of belief in, let's just use terminology that, Friday the 13th as being an unlucky day. All of that stuff is forbidden. However, it seems to be that by religious Jews, there is lots of that kind of stuff. And there's so many examples. For one, by a newborn baby or by a woman who's delivering, who's in labor and delivery. So there is a special psalm, chapter from Psalms with other Kabbalistic stuff that's supposed to be hung on the door, etc. There are all sorts of things that Kabbalists, that's righteous people that have a tradition dealing with the mysticism of the Torah, that they give people. It's called a kameya, where they write certain things on parchment or whatever. They give it to the person as a good omen and a protection. And then the Jewish people believe that Tuesdays are a very special, auspicious time, because in creation of the world, that's when God said, Ki toiv, twice. Every other day it says it once, and here it says twice that it was good. So Tuesday is the day we want to do things as opposed to other days. And the list goes on and on. So what's the difference?
I mean, even the mezuzahs.
Huh?
Even the mezuzahs.
Well, no, mezuzah is much easier for me to deal with than the examples I just gave. Okay. Briefly, mezuzah is not for protection. Mezuzah protects. I repeat, the mitzvah, the commandment of mezuzah is not for protection. That's not why a Jew is supposed to put a mezuzah on his doorpost. However, the mezuzah will protect him. Meaning, if a Jew fulfills the commandments because God said so, that's it. He will be protected. And if he doesn't, he's lacking the protection. The analogy that the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach gave for mezuzah when he first started the mezuzah campaign in the mid-70s was that it's like a helmet for a soldier going out to the battlefield. If you're wearing a helmet, you are not guaranteed that you will not get hurt. If you're not wearing a helmet, you are not guaranteed that you will get hurt. However, you must wear a helmet because that's what's going to protect you. There's no guarantees. So he says the same thing. If you don't have a kosher mezuzah, if a Jew doesn't have a kosher mezuzah, that's like not having a helmet on the battlefield. So does a mezuzah protect? Yes. That's one of the mitzvahs where it says that that mitzvah will protect the Jewish people when at home and when away. As long as he has the kosher mezuzahs on his home, they will protect him. But that's not why we do the mitzvah, and that's not what the mitzvah is all about. So if that's clear. The question is really those other things that we were mentioning. And that's a little bit more seemingly a fine line, that you're not supposed to believe in any of these things, and you're not supposed to be superstitious, and yet there's a long list of things that we do or refrain from doing for all sorts of these reasons. So instead of giving a whole class on that right now, I'm going to oversimplify it, and I'm going to sum it up in just a few words. But there's really a lot more to say. That which is forbidden are all those things which are associated with and they come from the spirits and the powers of tuma, of impurity. And that is not allowed for a Jew nor for a Noachite, as we're going to learn in the next part. So if having a rabbit's foot is a good luck charm, where does that come from? So whatever, we'll do the research, we'll go all the way back and we'll find out how that happened. So that is pagan. That is associated with idolatry. Therefore, you're not allowed, I'm just giving an example. I don't know this for a fact. Therefore, you would not be allowed to carry around a rabbit's foot for protection or whatever. Okay? However, what about having a kameya from a righteous person who wrote something, or having a coin that was given by a righteous person? Well, now that's different because that has energy of tahara, of kedusha, of holiness. And that the Torah doesn't forbid. So that's really the way you have to make the distinction. So even though they seem so similar, the list of things that we can't do and the list of things that we do. So we say Friday the 13th is not a good day, all right? And then we say the 15th of the Jewish month is a wonderful day because that's when the moon is full. Well, wait a second. The moon, since when are we're not, God forbid, worshiping the moon? Just like I mentioned, every month, the Jewish people have a ritual where we go outside during a certain part of the month, once a month, and we say a special blessing. We're not, God forbid, worshiping the moon. We're thanking God for the cycle of the moon, etc. And we do that once in 28 years for the sun. So it might seem to the unlearned eye that these guys are worshiping the sun, worshiping the moon. But we're not, God forbid. So similarly, when it comes to these things, it looks like this, but no, this is the difference. So sometimes it's a very subtle difference, but that's the real short explanation.
There's a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah, let's hear.
One of them, well, I guess they both have to do with the person trying to clean out clutter in their house. One of them is a friend, an old friend left stuff behind, clothing and such. And he's wondering if it's okay to, what should he do with that? The second
So
question,
the clothing, is it from priests and nuns?
no, it's just from an old friend.
That's-
So it's not necessarily with our class right now, but he's just wondering, is that something you just get rid of, or?
Did they purposely leave it there? Like, is there a question of returning a lost article?
Possibly, yeah, along those, at what point would a Noahide be able to discard it? And the second question, apparently he's reiterating that it's from an old girlfriend that he's no longer with, who left behind stuff. And the other one is a parent gave him as a gift a Goshko Bible. And what should he do with that? Is it something that,
I would say you should burn it. Right?
okay?
What else should you do with it?
Yeah, so the question would be, is that something, because it comes from a parent,
No.
that he should, for sentimental purposes, or just,
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, if a parent, who generally you have to honor and respect, gave a person, let's say the New Testament or whatever it may be, so the person, you need not tell your parents that. That's a separate issue, depending on the relationship, depending on will they ever find out. Those are all details, how to deal with it, with it, using common sense. But what should actually be done? Burn it. You don't have to tell your parents that you did that. You can, but there's, I don't see any need to, unless they want to have a ongoing interactive class or discuss things with you, or then you tell them, look, I don't believe in this, I don't do this, and whatever it is. But yes, it should be burned because you own it. If the parents gave it to the child, you own it. You can't own such a thing. As far as the clothes, so there's a lot of details that one would need to know. So let me just try to, in general, give a couple of guidelines. One, if the person knowingly left it behind without the intention of coming to get it, then you're the rightful owner and you can do whatever you want. You can keep it, wear it, sell it, give it away, doesn't matter. If, however, depending on how this happened, if, however, they left suddenly or abruptly, or they were thrown out, or they ran out, or something like that, well, that's a different story, because then this is their property and you'd want to give it back to them or send it to them or whatever. So there are other factors involved as well. And then, of course, there's going within the letter of the law, going above the required. And even if you're technically not obligated to, but if you want to, you can return it, but you're not obligated to. Then the question becomes, what happens if you want to have nothing to do with that person, or you don't even know their whereabouts? So there's a lot of factors, but the general guideline is that if something belongs to someone else and you know who it belongs to, you do need to give it back to them. And if they gave up, either they gave up the ownership or they gave up hope on retrieving it, then generally speaking, you don't have to. All right, so till next time. Next Thursday night, there is a slight chance that I will need to cancel, but in all probability, we will be having our class. And then after that, still have another class before Hanukkah. And then we have, I think I have 2 weeks off. Whatever, we'll see. Stay tuned, basically. So as it stands now, we're on for next week. And for the next couple of weeks, we're going to do it week by week. Just have to stay tuned. All right. Thank you, everybody. Hope you all gained, benefited, and enjoyed and understood. All right. So till next time.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.